All right, welcome back. So to review the ministerial performance review, we've got Mr. Zachary Ahmed, who is the special advisor to the president on infrastructure. He joins us in my studios in Abuja. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Well, you know, there are those who have this preliminary impression that the government is scoring itself good, and they just wonder, how could they score themselves good when almost everywhere you turn, you have people who have lost jobs, people who think, oh, wait a minute, I have to pay a lot more here and there, and yet this review seems to be scoring itself good. So what will you say to those people at the moment?
I think, Chamberlain, thank you, and good morning. I don't know where the conception is that the government is patting itself on the back, per se. We live in an environment that has changed drastically over the past year. And I think the government's focus now and the administration's focus is how do we reassess the new realities in the outbreak of the COVID pandemic and the significant challenges that our citizens in Nigeria alongside the rest of the world are facing. So this retreat and ministerial performance review is about two critical things. One is reassessing the environment and what we need to do to make sure that Nigerian citizens are protected. That's the president's mandate. The second thing is to objectively assess the performance of all ministers against a set of criteria and targets that were set at last year's retreat. So we have to live in today's reality. There's no patting oneself on the back, but there is a realization and a review of how do we make Nigeria better and stronger within this difficult global environment that is impacting our citizens.
That then to say, if it's a performance review against those set objectives, there's got to be maybe like an assessment in terms of how well or otherwise we've done in certain areas and where we need to improve. So there's got to be some sort of appraisal in terms of have I done well or not. Isn't that part of what is expected in this performance review?
Yeah, that's the second part that I said in terms of the objectives of the ministerial retreat, which is assessing all ministries and the government's performance related to criteria and targets that were set at last year's retreat. But also, more importantly, re-looking at those targets and making them more contemporary to today's challenges. I think it would be difficult to say that you keep a set of targets stagnant when we know the whole world has changed. So this retreat is very important. It's about repositioning and reevaluating and ensuring that the government's objectives for the next year and our targets are reevaluated, but also aligned to our current realities so that we can protect the Nigerian citizens and ensure that we're working and performing at an optimal level in today's reality.
All right. Would it be fair to say, for those who think, well, just so they know, while they assess themselves based on those yardsticks, just know that, look, in light of how people feel and think, they think, at the moment, you haven't done well in this first year, so you need to up the game.
Well, I think government is about continuously reevaluating where we are. In some areas, the administration has done well. In other areas, we know we have work to do. But like I said, this is about objectively reviewing performance. It's not about politics. It's not about a pat on the back. It's about really looking at the performance and the targets and the reality and asking ourselves what more can be done. So I'd say, you know, we need to also recognize that as government officials, constantly things change. And the way the Nigerian is feeling today, the way the citizens are feeling today, is as a consequence of many factors, some that are beyond the control of anyone globally. But that doesn't change the fact that we have the responsibility, and the administration, through the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, who cares deeply about our citizens, is up to the task. And that's what we're working on in this ministerial retreat.
But I don't know if this ministerial retreat will also factor in an issue that the president has raised with a number of times, and that is the function of collaboration. How far-reaching would you say that this retreat has or will address the issue of whether or not the ministries, departments, and agencies have collaborated significantly, effectively enough to make significant impact on the people? For instance, one of those agencies, one of those aspects of our national life would be security, where all the agencies were mandated several times over to collaborate. And that's probably going to also reflect in the kind of conversations that the Ministry of Labor and Productivity is having with the Ministry of Health to ensure that we forestall all kinds of strikes. We've had a significant number of them this year alone, even in the face of the pandemic that we're having. So talking about interministerial collaboration, how well would you think that that assessment would score for or against or necessary improvement for the entire process?
That's a great question. I think we must understand that no one in the government can exist in a silo. And by the nature of government, there are tasks that require multiple parties to engage. I'll give you an example. The Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund is a partnership that involves the Ministry of Works. If you think about the Second Niger Bridge, Lagos-Ibadan, and the Abuja-Kano Road. The NSIA that is providing the secured funding to ensure that those projects are executed on time is also involved. And then the Finance Ministry is ensuring that there's an objective assessment on the performance. And then the presidency has an overview on that. Something we were discussing at the retreat just yesterday is the continued collaboration between the Agricultural Ministry as well as the Water Ministry, given some of the engagement on ensuring that there's irrigation support to make sure that farmers can continue to farm year-round and support their yield. So I would say that the point that you raise around collaboration, even as we talk of security, cannot be understated. And in fact, the Chief of Staff session yesterday, as well as some other guests, really focused on that point. But I think by nature, everything that's designed is a collaborative approach. And I'll give you an example. For instance, the Electric Power Sector Reform Act in 2005 split out many of the responsibilities on power. And the president had mandated that we have a presidential power sector reform working group that involves the ministries of power, finance, the Central Bank of Nigeria. We even have the Kaduna State Governor for the support through NEC, and the Vice President leads that group. So we're continuing to ensure that everyone's talking, everyone's partnering, and that we can achieve the very important targets that the President has set for this administration.
All right, let me bring in Dr. Nohan Nachi, who is an infrastructure economist. He joins us via Zoom this morning. Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us. Well, yesterday, they talk about the president setting up nine top priority areas. You could call them KPIs, if you will. And, you know, of those 9 areas upon which they will assess this first year performance for the ministers, some of which include stabilizing the macroeconomy, achieve agric and food security, ensure energy sufficiency, improve infrastructure, drive industrialization, improve health, education and productivity, enhance social inclusion, fight corruption, and then again improve security. So if you were to assess based on these 9 priority areas, what will your assessment be?
Good morning, Nigerians, and good morning, Chamberlains and your colleagues there. It is clearly obvious that the situation we find ourselves as a country is quite pitiable. We have a government that will do the talking and will not back it up with actions that lead to results. And I'll pick this analysis on segment by segment. They pride themselves on agriculture. I will pick 3 items on agriculture which they talked about. Look at the anchor borrowing program, which the CBN is supposed to coordinate. They eventually have set out a fund which revolves around themselves, but just
All right, well, we'll try and reestablish that connection. But agriculture, of course, you know how many talk about that. Yes, it's got its food chain, and then it has that cycle related, which is a couple of days ago, the story about food security. Do you know what the president, they equally spoke about what they intend to do about ensuring food security, because you've had poultry farmers.
Oh, yeah.
You got farmers who get to the market saying, look, we've got challenges accessing our facility. That also has to do with getting infrastructure to link that up. But let's get back to him now. I believe we got the connection back online. Could you go ahead, Dr. Onachi?
okay, so I was just talking about the anchor borrowing because I decided to pick on the agriculture. And that is a clear example. When those you think should access the fund cannot access it, then you have no scheme. It becomes a failed state. Then you talk about, still on the agriculture, they have a National Agricultural Mechanization Program and the Presidential Fertilizer Initiative. In these 2 programs, they have claimed to have spent over 600 billion on them. But the question you ask yourself, who and who benefited from this? What is the fertilizer production? How many fertilizer plants has emerged in this few time? Because when we talk about this economic recovery, these are clear statistical information that we should be able to look at and say, yes, it is working or it is not working. So I will pick on that and I'll tell you, please, we have a failed case on that agriculture part. Then you look at the level of business inventions they try to create or try to do. First and foremost, they created the Development Bank of Nigeria with an injection of $1.5 million into it. They also injected another $1.5 million into Bank of Industry. But what I ask myself and what every caring Nigerian should begin to ask is very clear. The Development Bank, which they claim to have established, can we be able to know who has borrowed from that money, who that fund has been given? At the end of it, you still see this lending going through commercial bank, requesting for all kind of collateral. It is very pertinent to know that this is not the time for so many things they are thinking about in terms of revenue generations and otherwise. A typical example is the tariff increase, the pump price increase. What are the fundamentals behind it? I have said this before now, and I'll say it again without any reservations. The disco has failed, and they have failed beyond an unimaginable point. They all took up that asset on their ability to improve on the infrastructure, not on their ability to lump their their failure on the consumers. You took up that asset on, yes, you will overcome technical, you will overcome commercial, and you will overcome all kind of difficulties attached to it. But now you fail to that. Government is busy injecting funds into you, and we cannot get that. What does the people get back? Government supporting them to increase tariff. And that is also an indication of failure.
Dr. Nachi, just a moment.
Look at again.
Could you let me jump in and ask you? Just hang on a moment. You'll continue in a bit. Could you, with specific reference to the Anchor Borrowers Program, well, you say how many have been able to access it? Well, we know that there are reports of people who have gotten access to the fund. So what specifically is your point in terms of accessing the fund? Is there a certain percentage of people who you think should have accessed it and haven't been able to get the funds, or what exactly?
Okay. The anchor borrowing program have two sections that is clear. The most important section that will have impact, it is not when you release 5,000 or 10,000 to peasant farmers that will actually change our agricultural sector. I'm talking about the commercial agricultural loan of CBN, which has the tone to give the commercial farmers, the commercial agricultural investors, the requires incentive to really produce for the masses. And my concern, yes, the 5,000, 10,000 they're sharing among farmers, people get, the peasant farmers get that. But would that give us commercial agricultural value? The answer is no. Capital, no. But I'm talking about the commercial agriculture sector of the anchor borrowing program, of the CBN program. Now, what happened is this: when an investor, a farmer, a commercial agricultural investor apply for that, he goes through the commercial bank like you are seeking a normal commercial loan. And that has made it impossible for anybody to access it, because the commercial bank will equally demand for their collateral, would demand for their conditions of loan. The only difference between that and regular commercial loan is the interest values. And that is a concern.
So let's take it to Mr.
Until we begin.
Let's take this to Mr. Ahmad just to get his response to some of the issues you have raised. So, Mr. Ahmad, there will always be questions about, how these funds are dispersed, the criteria. He thinks that there's not much difference between what the government is offering and what commercial banks are offering. So, in terms of disbursement, especially at the commercial level, would you still rate the government to have done well?
Absolutely. I think we cannot pack everything into one assessment, right? The evidence is there. Some of these allegations are not backed up. If you look at the work that the administration has done with RIFAN, the Rice Farmers Association of Nigeria, the revolution that we have of rice in places like Argungu, in Kebbi, the rice mills that are coming on board every day all across the country, specifically some were commissioned recently in Kano and other areas. When we think about the fertilizer, the blending plants are there, the 6 that have been developed for everyone to see. There are areas to improve, and the government understands that. That's why we continue to work to modulate and improve our performance based on feedback. But to say that nobody has accessed funds, I think is a little bit of a stretch.
No, I'm not sure he meant